Woo! Jin-Woo let out a quiet breath of relief. He had finally made it through all 100 floors of the demon's castle. Closing his eyes, he let the rush of emotions wash over him. His mom's face suddenly popped into his mind. When he opened his eyes again, there were still system messages floating in front of him. Whoa, Jin-Woo couldn't believe his eyes. 4 level-up notifications popped up all at once, leveling up 4 times in one go. That was unheard of, especially since his progress had slowed down a lot after hitting level 90. His face lit up with excitement as he quickly checked his stats. A level, 97 offs. Yup, he'd really jumped 4 levels. Jin-Woo pumped his fist in the air. Nice, he exclaimed. Clearing the dungeon was a huge relief, and landing 4 levels made it feel like an amazing victory. But he knew better than to celebrate just yet. There was something even more important on his mind. The purified blood of the demon monarch. It was the last piece he needed to craft the elixir of life. Jin-Woo ripped off the bandages from his hand, and reached out to catch the flickering glow, coming from Balan's body. The demon monarch was finally defeated. A shiny ring on Balan's finger caught his eye. You found the demon monarch's ring. A voice said. Wanna take it? Jin-Woo nodded, and the ring flew into his hand. Then he spotted something else, a sleek sword lying near Balan. Another item found, demon monarch's sword. The voice announced, would you like to pick that up too? Just as Jin-Woo grabbed the sword, 2 daggers glinted in the dim light. You've got 2 demon monarch's daggers, the voice said excitedly. They're all yours if you want them. Jin-Woo groaned in frustration as one notification after another popped up, each offering him items he didn't really want. First came 2 sets of Balan's horns, and then a material item called Purified Blood of the Demon Monarch. With each new alert, Jin-Woo grew more annoyed. He wasn't here for these random drops. Jin-Woo burst with joy when he finally saw the notification. Purified Blood of the Demon Monarch had appeared. There it is, he exclaimed, grabbing all the items. He held out his hand, and called the blood to him. Material item. Purified Blood of the Demon Monarchs, acquisition difficulty. Category, material leaf. This glowing red liquid was made from Demon Monarch Balan's blood after it was purified. It had strong magic in it, but even after being cleaned up, it still had traces of poison. To make it safe and usable as medicine, Jin-Woo needed 2 special items, a World Tree Fragment, and some spring water from Echo Forest. Jin-Woo tilted the glass bottle, watching as the red liquid sloshed inside. This is actually the demon monarch's blood, he muttered to himself in awe. He already had the World Tree Fragment and spring water, so why wait? With a grin, Jin-Woo pulled up his craft window. Craft consumable. Elixir of Life 3 stirs to his surprise. The Elixir of Life was now glowing on the screen, ready to be crafted. Jin-Woo quickly scanned through the information. One word jumped out at him. Craftable.
There it was.
Elixir of Life. Craftable. App materials needed. App Purified Blood of the Demon Monarch. Swanchuan's World Tree. Fragment 1 Franchuan Spring Water. From Echo Forest 1 Franchuan's. A question popped up. Would you like to craft item? Elixir of Life. Jin-Woo couldn't wait to see what would happen. Without hesitating he clicked craft. Sir, crafting item. Elixir of Life. The countdown began. App 10, 9, 8. He held his breath. 7, 6, 5. App then a message appeared. The rate of success and item quantity will vary, based on the crafter's intelligence level. App Jin-Woo stared in disbelief. Did it really say his success, and how much of the elixir he'd get, depended on how smart he was? If that was true, what if he wasn't smart enough? Would it even work at all? Jin-Woo found himself nodding as the logic strangely clicked for him. The countdown raced on 4, 3, 2. Why did those words rate of success bug him so much? Well, at least he had one thing going for him. After finally figuring out how important intelligence was, he'd poured every single ability point into it. Then came the moment of truth. 1. Crafting is complete. Crafting was successful. You have acquired 6 items, elixirs of life. Yes, Jin-Woo threw his arms in the air, grinning from ear to ear. But as he celebrated, something caught him off guard. The bottle with the demon monarch's blood was still clutched in his right hand. The blood level had dropped a little, but he quickly pulled out the World Tree Fragment and spring water from Echo Forest, checking his inventory. What just happened? The only thing lying on the ground before him was the World Tree Fragment, which looked like it had a piece missing. He checked every corner of his inventory, but couldn't find any spring water. Could this be the problem? A quick glance at the crafting window gave him the answer. Apps materials needed. Talmal spurified blood of the demon monarch, 1 jar fundrage spring water from Echo Forest, Sirowanuk. Out of all 3 materials, only the spring water from Echo Forest was missing. It seemed like crafting had stopped because he ran out of that ingredient. Crafting only uses what's needed, not the whole item. Right? Yeah, it looked like that's exactly what happened here. Jin-Woo noticed that he didn't need much blood for the recipe, and the world tree fragment was always a big piece of wood. That's why the small jar of spring water from Echo Forest had run out first. Jin-Woo smiled. This wasn't bad news at all. It just meant he could make more elixirs if he got more spring water. Now there was one big question. Jin-Woo had to take a deep breath to calm himself when he saw not 1, but 6 wooden bottles of the elixir of life appear in front of him. He picked them up and read their details. Item: Elixir of Life, Acquisition Difficulty, Setsukuduri, Consumable, Axomystical Potion, that uses powerful magic to cure all diseases. You have to drink the whole bottle to get the full effect. Extra Jin-Woo wondered. Would this really work on my mom? I guess I'll find out today. Excited. He carefully stored the 6 jars of elixir of life in his inventory, along with the leftover ingredients. There were still plenty of other items to check out: a ring, a sword, 2 daggers, and even 2 random items. An S-rank instance dungeon boss really dropped a lot of loot. Jin-Woo was thrilled to see all these treasures, but he didn't have time to look at everything right now. Jin-Woo's top priority was to get out of there and see his mom. He quickly packed away all the items he'd gotten from the demon monarch, making sure not to miss anything, just because he was in a rush. After all, rushing can lead to mistakes. He glanced over his shoulder at his shadow soldiers. Even though they had just defeated an army much larger than their own, they were now standing neatly in rows, ready for whatever came next. Behind them, the ground was covered in the bodies of demon soldiers. But where was the dragon? Jin-Woo scanned the area, searching for the massive monster the demon monarch had been riding. All he could see were piles of dead soldiers. Did the dragon fly away during the fight? Before Jin-Woo could worry too much, Iron approached him, dragging something huge behind him. The lifeless body of Castellan, the winged dragon, lay before them. Jin-Woo turned to Iron and said, "Dang, that's pretty impressive." Iron scratched the back of his helmet, looking a little shy. It had been a while since Jin-Woo last praised him like this. Jin-Woo clapped Iron on the shoulder and stepped closer to the dragon's body. Just as I thought, Jin-Woo mused to himself. Everything about the dragon's name, its appearance had pointed to this moment. Black smoke began to rise from Castellan's corpse, signaling that Jin-Woo could now extract its shadow. Jin-Woo stretched out his arm. "Come out," he said. The shadowy creature popped out easily, probably because Jin-Woo was so much stronger now. It let out a loud screech, like an animal in pain. As it burst from the dragon's shadow, the dark mass quickly shaped into a familiar form, and bowed its head to Jin-Woo. "Choose a name." A message appeared before him. Jin-Woo blinked in surprise, staring at the message. Jin-Woo had thought the dragon would only be good for riding since he hadn't seen it in battle yet. But then he remembered it was a knight rank, which meant it had to be pretty skilled. It was awesome because even Igris, the star of the Shadow Army, had been a knight rank until recently. Of course, a demon monarch wouldn't pick just any weak monster to ride. Feeling happy about his new dragon's high rank, Jin-Woo gave a quick response. "Caselli." "No," he said, shaking his head. A 9-letter name was just too long. "Cassell." The winged dragon threw back its head and let out a mighty roar that echoed through the air. "Skrala." "Och. Good job, everyone," he said, calling his shadowy soldiers back to him, including Kaisel. It was time to leave Demon's Castle. But there was one last thing left to do. Jin-Woo checked his inbox to see if he'd completed the quest. A message popped up. "Quest complete. You collected 2 demon souls." Then it asked, "Do you want to see your rewards?" Jin-Woo clicked yes, excited to find out what he got. Suddenly, a cheerful Aradine sounded. The system showed his rewards. Top rank rune stone 2. It's a surprise. Jin-Woo couldn't wait to check them out. Jin-Woo's eyes lit up as he stared at his rewards. He had been curious about the rune stone since the start of the quest, so he couldn't resist picking it first. "Let's do this," Jin-Woo said to himself, selecting the first reward. Puntuan. Puntuan, top-tier runestone. Runestone Shadow Exchange, has been awarded. Puntuan, something small and heavy dropped into his palm along with the message. He stretched out his hand and found a rune stone that looked nothing like any he'd ever seen before. It glowed with an eerie black color that wasn't like any black he'd ever seen. It was deeper, darker, and almost seemed alive. Before he had to squeeze the stone in his hand to break it. But now all he had to do was think about crushing it. And, skirsh, skirsh shattered into pieces. Right in his palm. Whoa, what just happened? And what other secrets did it hold? Black energy from the rune stone swirled around Jin-Woo and soaked into his body. Curious, he quickly checked his skill window. Skill, Joe Exchange. LV, 1, Hots Joe, exclusive skill. Abs no mana needed. The caster can swap places with one of their shadow soldiers. Once used, you have to wait 3 hours before using it again. The cooldown time might change as the skill levels up. Jin-Woo's eyes lit up as he read through the details. Whoa, he muttered, blown away by what he was seeing. The only downside was having to wait a bit before using it again, but this skill was so cool that it made sense. There had to be some rules. So does this mean I can switch places with any of my shadow soldiers, no matter where they are? Basically, this ability let me teleport instantly. Jin-Woo thought about calling one of his soldiers to try it out, but then he had a better idea. Why not test it with a soldier who's really far away? He had some soldiers waiting outside the demon's castle, so he decided to use them for his test. Jin-Woo had split his team into 2 groups. One group stayed close to his sister, while the other kept watch around the neighborhood. He went for an easier move. Teleporting to Gina was out of the question. Surprising her would be a shock, and he wasn't sure how his shadow exchange skill would work. Focusing on one of the soldiers nearby, Jin-Woo whispered, "Shadow exchange." Whoa! The world around him faded as his shadow wrapped around him like a dark blanket. A sudden beep chimed in his ear with a message. The dungeon is resetting since the boss is beaten. Before he could panic, the feeling of weightlessness vanished, and everything steadied. The gravity suddenly flipped, and Jin-Woo shot upward. As fast as he had fallen, his vision, which had been darkness, snapped back to normal, in an instant. What's going on? Jin-Woo looked around, trying to make sense of where he was. A flickering streetlight, probably broken, cast weird shadows. A pushcart leaned against a wall, looking like it might tip over at any second. An electrical pole nearby had torn flyers flapping in the wind. It was an empty alley. Jin-Woo often walked through on his way home. Wait a minute, this is our neighborhood, right? And wasn't this the same spot where he'd sent his 5 soldiers to patrol earlier? But wait, Shaq was the one who'd moved. Jin-Woo's mind raced, as he tried to wrap his head around what had just happened. Despite feeling stunned, he managed to pull himself together enough to check the ground beneath his feet. Jin-Woo stepped out of the same shadow that his shadow soldiers had come from. He kicked at it gently with his foot. When he activated the skill before, his feet had sunk into the shadow like stepping into water. But now everything looked normal again. Jin-Woo was stunned and checked the skill info once more. The 3-hour countdown before he could use Shadow Exchange again had officially started. The message was clear: skill, Shadow Exchange, LV, 1 job, exclusive. Available in Su 2 5D9 5D7. Jin-Woo's heart pounded as he tried to process what had just happened. It all went down so fast, getting pulled into the shadow, and then, fork, from his perspective. It felt like time dragged on forever, but in reality it was instantaneous. He swallowed hard, still trying to wrap his head around it. Shadow Exchange. Whoa. Jin-Woo had finally gotten his hands on the medicine that could save his mom, and he knew every second counted. He took a deep breath and steadied himself, pushing down his surging mana. There was no time to waste. He quickly checked his phone. His heart sank when he saw the time: 10 o'clock at night. Visiting hours were long over, but Jin-Woo didn't hesitate. With a swift motion he summoned Castle, the shadow of the dragon. Kree! Castle burst out of the ground with a loud cry, his excitement clear as he appeared before his master. His huge wings replaced his missing arms, and this giant lizard, as big as a truck, stepped out. Castle spread his massive wings wide, making the narrow alley feel even smaller. Luckily the street was empty around them. He lowered himself so Jin-Woo could climb on easily, and Jin-Woo carefully hopped onto Castle's back. First time riding a dragon. No problem. Jin-Woo felt super comfortable on Kaisel's back. Flying. Piece of cake. He didn't care who tried to stop him. Not the hospital staff. Not the police. And definitely not even the army. With his newfound power, he was ready to soar past any obstacle. Nothing could stop Jin-Woo now. Let's go. He shouted, his face set with determination. Kaisel, sensing the command, spread his enormous wings and let out a loud scream as they shot into the sky. The wind rushed past them as Kaisel zoomed off in the direction Jin-Woo had pointed. Back at the Hunters Association, a big meeting was going late into the night. The Korea-Japan raid on Jeju Island was about to happen, and everyone was pitching in to finally get rid of those annoying ants once and for all. Here's some intel from Japan, said an employee. Pressing a button on a remote control, a video from a Japanese satellite lit up the huge screen. The satellite had used a special manna-detecting camera to capture the footage. The recordings captured the first, second, and third attacks. President Go frowned as he listened. Almost all the ants had left the colony except for the queen and her guards. Just like Japan had explained, it was a bit annoying that some guards stayed behind. But that's how it usually goes in tough dungeons. Bosses often have extra protection. Still, even with most of the ants gone, no plan is ever completely safe. President Go was leading the Korean team on this mission, so he had to think about every possible scenario. What if the ants figure out the queen is in danger and head back to the cave sooner than we expected? He asked. Japan already had an answer ready. They're planning to use something called a disruptive electromagnetic pulse. A what now? Someone replied. Confused. President Go explained. These aren't regular ants. They're magic creatures with their own special way of communicating like a private frequency. That's how they could control such a massive army. Thousands strong. President Go nodded, taking it all in. Japan could mess things up by using an electromagnetic pulse, someone said. That's what they claim, Mr. President. And then we'd only have to handle the queen and her guards. But the plan itself was pretty straightforward. But it had a better chance of working than any other idea they'd ever come up with. So why was President Go so nervous? He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hands. Maybe the reason I feel so nervous is suddenly. President Go's head jerked towards the window. Everyone else in the room jumped in surprise. Manager Jin-Woo, acting as President Go's personal bodyguard, quickly stepped closer. Is everything okay, sir? He asked, just a moment ago. President Go glanced at Jin-Chul, but his face showed no sign of anything unusual. Didn't you feel that? President Go asked suddenly. His employee looked confused. Sir, what do you mean? A huge surge of energy had just swept through the room, even though it was quick. President Go definitely noticed it. He stared out the window, deep in thought. The employee, who was in the middle of a presentation, hesitated. Sir, they asked softly, trying to get his attention. President Go snapped his head back toward them, breaking his trance. Though he was worried about where this sudden surge of energy came from, his main focus right now had to be this meeting. He thought for a moment, then turned to the person in charge. Are you still not able to reach Hunter Jin-Woo Sung? Yoon Huf-beek asked, looking toward the wave of mana. Gu Min replied with a grin. I may be retired, but my skills are as sharp as ever. A heavy silence fell between the two men sitting together at a neighborhood food stall. Yoon Huf turned back around, his expression serious. Do you have any idea what just happened? One of them asked, leaning in with a curious look on his face. Maybe Jongan and Haein are competing to take over the Hunters Guild, the younger man suggested, smirking as he tossed back his shot. Yoon-ho raised an eyebrow, clearly not amused. Are you trying to be funny? He asked flatly. The other man shrugged. Wasn't it? Yoon-ho just stared at him, unimpressed. No. Never mind. Byung-gui was one of those people who didn't exactly fit the mold. His sense of humor, let's just say it was unique. But then again, he had a lot to brag about. He was the first S-rank hunter in history to retire, without losing any body parts. And not only was he the first, he was also the only one who'd managed that feat. Making it as an S-rank hunter means earning a lot of money. So it's really surprising that someone like Yoon-ho would just lose interest and want to quit, especially since he didn't come from a rich family. Mithiyun noticed Yoon-ho staring at him and asked, Are you really gonna go back? Mithiyun? Yoon-ho replied, You saw how Yoon-suk died, Mithiyun-ho said. Trying to make sense of it, Yoon-ho nodded. That's exactly why I need to go back. But the end, Byung-gu looked at him, taken aback by Yoon-ho's response. Yoon-ho finished his drink before speaking up. If we leave those ants alone, they'll take over the whole country. Since when did you become such a hero? Someone asked. Yoon-ho shrugged. I'm just coming up with a cool excuse since I have to go anyway. Guilds like theirs couldn't ignore orders from the Hunters Association. The association helped guilds too much, so they had to obey. If Yoon-ho really wanted to avoid going, he could always try to run away. But no country would welcome a high-ranking hunter who ditched an important mission. Who'd trust someone like that? It's not like I even want to run. Yoon-ho muttered. Byung-gu just said what everyone was thinking. I'm not going. I refuse, Yoon-ho said firmly, crossing his arms. If you're here to persuade me, forget it. No, that's not why I'm here, Yoon-ho interrupted softly, placing money on the table for their drinks. He stood up as they finished their bottle. I just came to say goodbye, in case we don't see each other again. His voice trembled slightly. Yoon-ho Byung-gu started, but his words trailed off as he watched Yoon-ho wave and walk away. The older hunter's figure grew smaller until it vanished, leaving Byung-gu feeling hopeless and alone. Yoon-ho definitely knew this mission was super dangerous, but he didn't let fear take over. Instead of being dragged along like a scared hunter, he looked ready to fight. His face showed determination, and he even seemed a little excited about smashing those pesky ant creatures this time. Byung-gu, on the other hand, was shocked. He stopped mid-bite, his chopsticks floating in the air, as he chewed slowly. He thought to himself, wait a minute, how many hunters actually hate fighting magic beasts? Sure, some healers avoided it, but they were usually too busy helping others to worry about fighting. Byung-gu stared blankly at his fish cake soup, scratching his head in confusion. Could it be that you needed to love fighting, or even crave it to become an awakened being? That didn't make sense, but he couldn't shake the thought. Byung-gu snorted to himself and slurped down the rest of his soup. Jin-Woo zoomed into the hospital, room 35. That's where he needed to go. From the start, Jin-Woo had no plan to walk through the main entrance like everyone else. Instead, he led Kasil straight to the window of his mom's room. The curtain slid open mysteriously, revealing what was inside. Jin-Woo's mom lay peacefully on the bed, just like when he'd visited before. Jin-Woo quietly slipped in through the window he'd opened. Using ruler's hand, Kasil had already faded into the shadows, out of sight. As Jin-Woo stood beside her bed, his heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. If anything went wrong, there would be no turning back. His mom had been sick for a long time, and now he was here to try to make things right. There was no way to know if she could even swallow the elixir of life, or if she'd be okay if she did. But up until now, Jin-Woo had seen the system pull off some pretty wild stuff. Things he wouldn't have believed if someone else had told him about them. Yet here he was, seeing it all with his own eyes. He thought to himself, I've made it this far even though I started as an E rank. And it was all thanks to the power of the system. Jin-Woo, who had been quietly staring at his hands, finally looked up. His mom was standing right in front of him, looking like she might jump up any second if he said her name. Jin-Woo quickly summoned the elixir of life. Boom! A wooden bottle popped into his hand, and it felt warm. He checked the item info again and again, to make sure he didn't miss any tiny detail.